Welcome to the Fitness Blueprint Podcast. My name is Jackson Adamowitz, and today we are going to dive into the topic of weight loss. More specifically, we are going to start with talking about our current understanding of the science or the physiology behind what happens within our bodies when we are overweight or obese. We are going to also talk about the driving factor of weight gain or weight loss, which is energy balance. I will give you three of the largest factors within your lifestyle that you can change if your goal is to lose weight, and we'll also talk about what healthy weight loss looks like. And then also I will give you a specific protocol that I have developed in order to accomplish your weight loss goals. So without further ado, let's dive into our current topic of this podcast episode, which is weight loss. You've probably heard it a million times that obesity is really bad for you, or being overweight is really bad for you. So you don't need another person in your ear striking fear or warning you of the dangers of this happening. But we are going to kind of dive into what actually happens within our bodies when you are overweight or obese, so that you have a good understanding of what's actually going on and why people are saying this is such a dangerous thing to have in your health history. One thing to note before I do a deep dive into this topic is that researchers are still looking for the exact reasons why obesity is so harmful to our bodies. We know that obesity can contribute to other chronic conditions like diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and a lot of other comorbidities, so to speak. But in terms of the exact mechanisms of action or what is exactly happening within our bodies, researchers are still doing a deep dive, but this is what we know so far, or at least has been hypothesized to be going on within our bodies. What we know is that obesity is a state of malnutrition. Now, when you hear the word malnutrition, you're probably thinking to yourself of some emaciated figure or somebody who is very undernourished or who just is not eating any food, right? Somebody who is starving. That's not always the case with malnourishment. You can be overnourished to a point where your body doesn't really know what to do with itself, So, we as human beings get our energy from what we consume. That can be the food that we eat, the drinks that we drink. That's not rocket science exactly. We don't get our energy from the sun like plants do through photosynthesis, right? We have to consume our energy. As I mentioned, obesity is a state of malnutrition. So when we consume energy, our bodies either have to use it for certain processes within our bodies, or we have to store it somewhere to use for later. When we consume too much of this energy, it doesn't really matter what source that energy is from, that food or that drink or wherever you're getting your energy from will be stored as fat cells or adipose cells. So we know that these fat cells produce and secrete several proteins called adipokines. That's not necessarily important, but they do play important roles in inflammation or inflammatory control. Obese individuals who have more adipose tissue or more adipocytes or fat cells, their fat cells tend to secrete more pro-inflammatory adipokines. So their fat cells are secreting this more inflammatory protein, while more lean individuals tend to secrete more anti-inflammatory adipokines. So the mechanism for why this is still relatively unknown. But these inflammatory markers secreted by this adipose tissue or this fat tissue lead to other chronic conditions or diseases such as hypertension, diabetes, dyslipidemia, and other metabolic syndromes and other problems within our body. And that's really why we think that obesity is harmful or that it's considered its own disease, right? Obesity wasn't necessarily considered its own disease until pretty recently in history. That's about as deep as we're going to go into this science because, again, as I mentioned, this is still an ongoing topic of research and we're still trying to get a good understanding. What we do know, though, is that being overweight or being obese can contribute to these pro-inflammatory markers within our bodies. Let's pivot away from that now and let's talk about the driving factor in weight loss and weight gain. So if you can manage this one factor, you will be able to control your weight. So as I mentioned earlier, as human beings, we get energy from what we consume. We get this energy in the form of calories or kilocalories, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to refer to them as calories in this podcast episode. We need these calories to function, right? This is our energy source. So when we perform activities, or even when we're just living, we burn energy, we burn calories. The number one way that we burn calories is actually through our resting metabolism. So just staying alive, we need a certain level of energy for our body to function. So this is called our resting metabolism. Think of this as the minimum amount of energy expenditure that you need to have in order to just be alive, right? If you are just lying comatose, but you are alive, this is the minimum amount of energy that you need. Another way that you burn calories is through physical activity. So a step up from just being alive, you typically are functioning throughout society, right? You're up and moving, you're getting up from a chair, getting out of bed, grabbing for objects. That requires energy. Every action that you do requires some level of energy for our body to have that process occur. And then another big player in our energy expenditure, how much energy we burn, is through exercise, right? So when you hear about weight loss programs, you typically hear about some sort of exercise program being included because you burn more calories when you exercise at higher intensities. And then lastly, there is also a thermic effect that food has, which will cause you to burn more calories after consuming a meal. We're not going to dive into the deep science behind all that, but just know that you burn calories when you consume food, and that usually has to do with the whole digestive process. We're not going to dive into that. More specifically, I want to talk about exercise because, as you know, this is the Fitness Blueprint podcast, and we're going to talk about ways that you can lose weight and incorporate fitness into your routine in order to accomplish your goals. So exercise is something controllable, right? That along with physical activity, those are two things that we can control to help us burn more calories. So any activity that you are burning calories, you can kind of gauge on your own. You don't need some sort of lab experiment in order to accurately predict how many calories you're burning in a session. You can kind of gauge what level of intensity that you are performing an activity at, and the higher level intensity activities, you're going to burn more calories. So for example, if you are running a sprint down a road or down a track, you're going to burn more calories than if you are just simply walking that same distance. Why? Because it requires more energy. That's a really simple way to put it, but like I said, we're just going to stay kind of surface level to simplify this whole process. So when you add up your resting metabolic rate, the thermic effect of your food, your physical activity, and your exercise, that is the amount of calories that you will burn. And if you consolidate that into a single day, that's how many calories you will burn in a single day. There's not a very good way to precisely predict this for individuals without doing a whole bunch of crazy experiments, which not a lot of people have access, time, or money to do. So there are great calculators out there, and there are great estimators. A lot of smartwatches are starting to try to estimate the number of calories we burn. There are a lot of fitness trackers, etc. So yes, we are burning calories a lot throughout the day, but we are also consuming a lot of calories in the things that we eat and in the things that we drink. In later podcast episodes, we will talk about more nutrition-based strategies, and we'll dive into that a little bit deeper, but just know that whatever you consume usually has levels of energy in it or calories in it. So the simple principle for understanding weight loss and weight gain: if you burn more calories than you consume, you will lose weight. If you consume more calories than you burn, you will gain weight. That is called energy balance. And that is really the driving factor behind weight loss and weight gain. There are a lot of other theories out there, not a lot of which has a lot of research to back it or any evidence to back it. This also explains why there's not one perfect diet for weight loss. Despite what you might hear on social media, the cult-like diet followers that you see and the big fitness and diet influencers that you hear about, there's not one specific diet that works for every single person, right? So all the carnivores, the ketos, the low carb, the paleos, all of that, if somebody is losing weight while trying a specific diet, it is because they are burning more calories while on that diet than what they are consuming. Now, if you're on a specific diet for health or medical reasons, listen to your doctors, listen to your dietitians, listen to your professionals who are giving you that diet to follow, because weight loss might not be the only goal that you have with this specific diet. But for this podcast's sake, we are just talking about weight loss. So let's dive into those 3 big factors that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that are within your control and that can help you on your weight loss journey. The number 1 factor is going to be diet. right? Because we want to limit the number of calories that we consume in comparison to the energy that we expend in order to lose weight. As a general recommendation, and this is for healthy weight loss, you want to aim to be in a caloric deficit, so you want to burn this amount of calories more than what you consume, of about 500 to 750 calories per day. And if you stick with that consistently, in about a week's time, you will burn 1 to about 1.5 pounds of weight per week. And that is considered pretty healthy weight loss. Anywhere from 1 to 2 pounds per week for most individuals will be healthy weight loss. Now, more obese individuals or larger individuals might be able to lose more weight at a given time. They might be able to create more of a caloric deficit and still be healthy. Now, if you are looking for specific numbers to follow, I would recommend speaking to a registered dietitian or medical professional about ways in which you can incorporate a caloric deficit into your routine. But as a general rule of thumb, aiming for 500 to 750 calories per day of a deficit will help you lose about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of weight per week. If you are someone who does not like the tedious nature of counting calories, or you just think it would be too difficult for you, maybe you have a really busy schedule, there are a few ways that you can kind of control the amount of calories that you consume. The number one way I recommend is through portion control. A lot of us will consume very large portions of food, which contributes to weight gain and obesity. So if we can cut down on the portion size that we have while still consuming the amount of food that we are looking to consume, then we can create more of a deficit than what we were doing before. Additionally, if you focus on a diet that is focused on whole foods as opposed to a lot of processed, added sugars, high fats, fried foods that have a lot of additional calories, that can help us create a caloric deficit as well. I'm not saying you have to completely cut those out of your diet. Again, this is not a diet podcast episode. We are talking about weight loss here, and the overall and the overarching principle behind weight loss is being in that caloric deficit. Another important factor to talk about when it comes to diet is getting in the nutrients that you need, right? So there are a lot of recommended daily intake amounts of certain nutrients that you need. That includes proteins, that includes carbohydrates, that includes fats, that includes micronutrients such as, vitamin D, vitamin B12, vitamin C, all of those things your body needs in order to function and to function well. So make sure, if you are choosing a specific diet to follow, that you are getting all of those recommended nutrients. And again, in future episodes, we will talk about those in a little greater detail, but for now, just make sure whatever diet you are following, if your goal is weight loss, that you are creating a caloric deficit in a healthy way that makes sure that you are getting all of the necessary nutrients that your body needs in order to function and to function well. The second largest lifestyle factor that you can change in order to affect your weight loss journey is your physical activity and exercise. As a general rule of thumb, you want to get at least 150 minutes per week of cardiovascular exercise. And we have a podcast episode about this, about cardiovascular exercise specifically, but that includes things like running, walking, swimming, biking, anything that really elevates your heart rate. A lot of cardiovascular exercise measurements are great predictors of longevity and health. But additionally, cardiovascular exercise helps burn calories. As you're getting your heart rate up, as you're working harder, you're going to burn more calories. Additionally, something that is very important for weight loss is resistance training, some sort of resistance training. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to pump iron. You want to do something against resistance though. You want to build up your muscles because your muscles actually will help raise your metabolic rate, because muscle burns more energy than fat does at the same weight. So if you increase your muscle mass, your resting metabolic rate will be a little bit higher, and that will also aid in your weight loss because you are then creating more of a caloric deficit. So aiming for at least 2 to 3 days per week of resistance training can be incredibly beneficial. Make sure that you're following a progressive program that will help you continue to make progress in resistance training and exercise in general. And then last but certainly not least, with physical activity and exercise activity, you want to make sure that you are being consistent. And this goes for diet as well. If you are not consistent, if you miss multiple days out of the week of your given workout program or of your diet, it tends to average itself out. Now, Some exercise is better than no exercise, but this specifically pertains to diet. If you are doing really well in a caloric deficit of 500 calories per day, you're on pace to lose about a pound per week. But then one day you have a cheat meal and that puts you about 2,000 calories over your goal. Well, the 4 days before that, where you were in a 500 calorie deficit, now have been scratched, right? Because it tends to average itself out, right? That is energy balance. If you burn more calories than you consume, you will lose weight. If you consume more calories than you burn, you will gain weight. So that averages itself out. It doesn't automatically reset at the beginning of a day or at midnight or whatever. So you need to stay consistent with it if you want to see weight loss. And then the third largest lifestyle factor that you can change, and this one takes a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and maybe even a little bit of coaching if you're not familiar with this area or this space, is your psychology or your behavior change, right? Your mindset or your outlook on your goals, on your processes, whatever it may be. Some ways that you can change your behavior towards something is you can set goals, right? So the more specific, the more focused your goal is, the more likely you are to work towards that. That can really help boost your motivation. Another thing is self-monitoring, tracking your progress, whether that be stepping on a scale and measuring your weight every day or every week. Maybe you keep a nutrition journal, or maybe you write down your workouts in a workout log or use some sort of app or fitness tracker to track your activity. You need to be monitoring your progress, because that way, in the future, if you hit a plateau or you're not making any progress, you can kind of look at, okay, well, what's been going on with my diet? What has changed about my physical activity? Is there something that I can tweak in different areas of my life that can help me continue to make the progress that I want to make? So ongoing self-monitoring is incredibly important. And then problem solving. There are bound to be problems in our fitness journeys, especially when it comes to weight loss. You have to be able to overcome obstacles. You have to be able to deal with challenges when they arise. So having a good support system in place, having prepared strategies for predictable events can be very helpful. If you change your perspective on these things ahead of time, as opposed to letting it happen and then letting it just absolutely tear you down and derail your progress, can be a little more beneficial. And I kind of alluded to this a lot more in the beginning, but having a support system, having an accountability system can be incredibly valuable in your weight loss journey. So have family, have friends, have people around you to support you and maybe even join you in your journey. The more people that you get together and the more help that you have, the more likely you will be to achieve your goal. Some additional tips that I have, in addition to those three big factors, are personalizing your weight loss or your fitness experience. I'm going to give you, in a little bit, a pretty broad protocol, but I want you to personalize this. The more control that you feel you have over this protocol or over this process, the more likely you are to stick with it and to be able to overcome those challenges in the future. Additionally, identify strategies early in the process that will help you continuously adapt to the given changes of your life, to the given changes of your weight loss program. Just give yourself strategies in place that you will have in order to continue to see progress. Now I'm going to give you a protocol to follow that you can follow in order to lose weight. It's very broad, it's very general, but it has a lot of key factors that come into play when it comes to weight loss. So step number one of this protocol is set goals. I've said this from the beginning, and you can go back to the first episode of this podcast, which is all about goal setting and giving yourself a target. But this is incredibly important. If you don't have something to aim for, you don't know what you're shooting at. So start by establishing those clear goals for your diet, for your physical activity, and for things like your support system or putting strategies into place that will help you along your journey. The first phase of this protocol is what I call the preparation phase. This is what you will do before you start to actually implement some of these habits that you will be developing. So this stage is absolutely crucial, and it helps you prepare for the oncoming challenges that you will face in your journey. Step number 2 is set up your self-monitoring strategy. Okay, are you going to use some sort of app to track your fitness, to track your diet? Are you going to use just a pen and paper to log your workouts, to log your diet? Are you going to have a coach to help you along the way? Are you going to do it by yourself? Are you going to have people guiding you. How frequently are you going to weigh in? How frequently are you going to monitor your weight? That is completely up to you. In terms of the self-monitoring and the weight checking, I recommend, at best, at least once per week, stepping on the scale and looking at the number and writing that down and logging it. The more consistent you are with it, the more you can kind of get into tune with what you're doing with your diet, with your physical activity. Now, when you are weighing yourself for a weight loss goal, make sure that you're doing it at the exact same time per day. I typically recommend it first thing in the morning, completely naked if you have a scale at home, so that way you don't have to worry about the weight of clothes. If you have to make a bowel movement before, do that. Just make sure you're consistent with whatever you're doing, whatever you're consuming. Don't eat breakfast before or eat breakfast before. Whatever you do, stay consistent with the time and the conditions in which you weigh yourself. That way you have a more accurate number to follow. Step number 3 is creating that dietary plan. Now, I recommend, if you have access to or the capability to get in touch with a registered dietitian, especially one who specializes in weight loss and healthy weight loss, that will be your best friend. Okay, there are a lot of self-proclaimed nutrition coaches out there, some of which are really bad, some of which are really good, but the best way to get the best source, the best information is from an actual registered dietitian. But if you are confident enough with the strategies that I'm giving you or the strategies that you have learned about on your own, then absolutely go for it. Just make sure that you are aiming for a healthy and realistic target with your weight loss, but create some sort of dietary process that you are going to follow, whether that be counting your calories, which is technically the most effective method for losing weight and like the best method for losing weight, but it's very challenging and tedious to do. You can focus on portion control. You can focus on cutting out processed and sugary foods. Just make sure that you're focusing on a well-balanced diet, getting plenty of protein in, getting plenty of vegetables, fruits, and all other essential nutrients that your body needs in order to survive and to survive well and in a healthy way. And then the last part of this preparation phase is planning your physical activity. Give yourself a plan in place for following a regular fitness regimen. Remember to get in that 150 minutes minimum of cardiovascular exercise. That can be broken up in any way that you want to do it. I don't recommend doing it all on one day. Make sure that you space it out, but stay active, stay moving. Additionally, you want to aim for that 2 to 3 days minimum of resistance training focused workouts, and then also find ways to get active in addition to your exercise, whether that be riding your bike to work, walking to class as opposed to driving 10 minutes. Find some way in which you can implement strategies for increasing your physical activity and your exercise. Once you have that preparation phase out of the way, we are now into the taking action phase. This is where you will actually implement those strategies that you have prepared yourself for. So this is where you're going to implement those dietary changes that you have, whether that be get rid of extra sugary foods in the house or following your diet. Make sure that you're kind of keeping some sort of track on what you are consuming. That way you can look back on it and make necessary changes, and we'll talk about that in our next phase, but make sure that you're sticking with it, staying consistent, staying disciplined, and the same thing goes for your physical activity as well. There are going to be days where you just don't want to do it. There are going to be days where you are not feeling motivated to work out, but the more consistent you are with this process, the better results you will see, and I can almost guarantee that. Okay, so stick with it, stay consistent, stay focused with your diet and with your physical activity. Remember to consistently self-monitor. This means checking in on a scale pretty regularly. Again, I recommend daily to weekly, getting a pretty frequent measurement on that weight so that you can make adjustments as needed. And then make sure that you are leaning on those resources that you set up for yourself, that social support system or that coach that you have. Make sure that you are really tapping into those resources. The first, I would say, about 6 weeks are probably the most important for this action phase. The first week might feel good, you might feel in a routine, but you might find yourself in a little bit of a rut week 2, week 3, week 4, maybe even later on, maybe week 8 to 10, you might be feeling in a rut. When that occurs, you want to make sure that you have built up a lot of the healthy habits and that you have been consistent with it, because it will be easier to get out of that rut once you have those habits built up. And then the last phase of this weight loss protocol is the adjustment phase. So if you notice you are kind of plateauing and you think that you are doing everything right, look back at those logs. This is where that self-monitoring comes into play in a tremendous way. You need to make sure that you are logging your physical activity. You need to make sure that you are logging something about your diet, whether that is a nutrition journal, nutrition log, maybe use an app to track your calories or to track what you eat. Whatever you are doing, make sure that you have something to look back on in the case that you are not making the progress that you want to make. If you can look back on what you have done already, you might be able to identify areas in which you can improve upon and to make those adjustments and implement those into your routine. If you are not self-monitoring, it might come as a mystery to you and seem kind of out of the blue that you're not making the progress that you want to see. Additionally, some things that a lot of people see as pitfalls is they might not be tracking their nutrition properly. So make sure that you are reading the nutrition label effectively. More specifically, look at the serving size of foods, because that is what all of that nutrition label is based off of on whatever food or drink packaging that you have. Look at the serving size, because a lot of the servings on your favorite cereal, on your favorite snack, might be a lot smaller than you think. And those servings and those extra calories can really add up. So pay attention to that, because that is a huge pitfall that people have. Other people don't take into account the calories that they drink, whether through alcohol or through sugary beverages. Those are a lot of calories, and they tend to add up for people if they're not aware of it, and they consume a lot of those. So the adjustment phase is about making adjustments as needed within whatever area that you are monitoring that you believe could contribute to not losing the amount of weight that you are aiming to lose. And again, working with a coach or especially a registered dietitian with the diet portion of this weight loss journey can be invaluable. It can be incredibly helpful. So I hope that protocol kind of makes sense. Again, it was pretty broad, but it gives you the exact stepping stones that you need to take in order to lose weight. If you do it correctly, you will lose weight. It's just a matter of staying consistent. It's a matter of having that social support in place. And it's about creating a lifestyle that helps create that caloric deficit that you need in order to lose weight. So that is the foundational information behind weight loss. If you have any questions whatsoever, you can leave them in the comments of the video if you are watching on YouTube. If you are on the podcast, you can shoot me an email. My email is jackson@jacksonryanfitness.com. And there's also a contact page on my website, which is jacksonryanfitness.com. Whatever platform you are listening to this on, be sure to give us a good rating, a thumbs up on YouTube, or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts is incredibly helpful. Again, I appreciate all of your support, and I look forward to making more episodes of the Fitness Blueprint podcast so that we can help more people to begin their fitness journeys. Again, my name is Jackson Adamowitz. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you for the next episode.